Yo, what's popping, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Vitamin C's. We were away last week. Tim was out in sunny Los Angeles, just chilling, exploring, vibing on that LA vibe. One of my favorite places to visit too, so I ain't mad at you. As a quick update, we won't be here next week either because I'm off to Spain, so I'll be away getting some sun for a week. I'll come back. I will be no more tan than what I am now because for some reason I don't tan. What can I say? As usual, I'm joined by my homie, my compadre, my co-host in crime, Mr. Tim Shields. What's popping, Tim?
Nothing much. It's good to be back, man. I was gonna say, like, I went to LA and I probably don't look like I went to LA. I'm just pasty as hell. So, like, even if I get like any kind of quote unquote tan, I just freckle up anyway. But it was cool being on the West Coast, saw the Hollywood sign, went to Universal Studios. Shout outs to my friends Gina and Kendre. Gina works at Universal Studios, gave me a tour. Super awesome, super fun. But it's fun to be back on the East Coast. Was a little jet lag for a bit, but it's good to be back on East Coast time.
So for anyone that hasn't been to Hollywood, I mean, I've been around Hollywood a few times. The first thing you need to realize is you cannot get close to that Hollywood sign. Everybody's like, you see all these pictures, like people are zooming in to see that Hollywood sign. Like it's high up. You know, I've got one where I'm standing at a 7-Eleven on the corner. I'm just like a random street corner in Backstreet, Hollywood, just taking the photo from a distance because it was a nightmare to try and get up that hill. There is a footpath where you can walk a certain way through, but you really do need a guide to get you there. Hollywood in itself, though, is it's an experience, right? Because the strip is not what you'd think.
No. It was cool. And we like by the time I actually went down Hollywood Boulevard, I'd been to LA before, but this was a little bit more in depth. But was there for a bit, went down Hollywood Boulevard on a like Monday. It was a little weird. It's kind of overrated from like what they say. And then I
Yeah,
went on that footpath that you talked about, and it was only because my friend Gina used to be like a Hollywood Hills like tour guide. So she
this
would
is what I'm
drive
saying,
through there.
right?
Yeah, so she knew exactly where the footpath was. She was like, "Yeah, that house up there, that's Jason Statham's house." Like, "Oh, that house over there, that's Chris Evans." Katy Perry used to live like over here. She lives over here now. That house with the blue doors used to be like Bruno Mars's house. He sold it like a year or two ago or something like. So like she knew exactly where everything was. Past Quentin Tarantino's house too at one point.
Yeah, so I've done those tours. They're fun. I also kind of like got to a point where I was like, I'm sick of seeing houses bigger than what I'm ever going to afford. Let me
Yeah,
go
fair.
home.
I felt that. Yeah.
You know, because I'm sitting there like, yeah, this is dope. These houses are dope. Am I ever going to own one? No. So why do I keep looking at them? Let me go. You know what I mean? Venice Beach was my vibe. Like, Venice Beach was probably the favorite place I've ever been. Like, just for the atmosphere, the vibe, everything that was going on around there. Anyway, this is a Boston Celtics podcast. We can't be giving LA too much love. I mean, people are going to be coming out with the pitchforks at us, man. So we're going to dive straight in. We've got some talk about Mr. Jayson Tatum. Did an interview with Taylor Rooks from Bleacher Report, and it was good. We got a different side of JT. Most important thing to hit on first and foremost, Tatum played 2 months at the end of the season with a non-displaced fracture in his wrist. Please let me repeat that. Tatum played 2 months, includes the entirety of the NBA postseason with a non-displaced fracture in his wrist. 2 months, had 7 30-point games or more in the playoffs. Dropped 46 points against the Milwaukee Bucks. I think it was game 6. I did tweet it out. With a fractured wrist.
Yeah.
Span off, got a post entry pass against PJ Tucker, span off him, two-handed dunk while the weak side defender's closing out on him with a broken wrist. Then he injured his shoulder against Miami. Now he's playing with one bad shoulder, one bad wrist, and the dude's exhausted because he's played straight up basketball for about 10 years. Obviously, it was 2, but, emphatic. With a broken wrist. And y'all are out here calling him soft. And if you feel like I'm talking to you when I say that, that's because you most likely were out here calling him soft, and I am directly looking at you. You were wrong. Jayson Tatum wants his apology. I'm waiting.
It was interesting to hear him talk about it so candidly. And I mean, to be clear, he wasn't really like just openly talking about that injury either. Like Taylor Rooks asked him, like, when you're in the playoffs, people are playing banged up. Like, were you playing through anything? And so apparently the injury originally came back in February. He doesn't know I don't know if he knew exactly when it happened, but he was like, I was driving back. We had just played the Hawks, and I was in my car, and it felt like there was like a weight on my wrist. And Nick Sang, who is his trainer with the Celtics, was like, okay, we should get this checked out at the All-Star break. And Tatum was legitimately afraid to get that thing looked at because he was worried that it was going to be pretty significant, that he was going to have to miss time. He doesn't want to miss time. He hates getting subbed out. He said as much in the interview. If you haven't checked it out, you should after you watch this episode because it's an excellent interview. He's quite candid about it.
Unless you're not in the US.
Unless you're not in the US, which apparently is the thing. I don't know.
Bullshit.
It's terrible. They geotagged it, so Adam was not able to watch the whole thing. He got the clips that we've got, but essentially what ended up happening with that wrist is Tatum was really nervous because he was feeling that much pain in it. He was like, I can't even lift a plate. I can't lift a cup. I have to keep it wrapped. He was wrapping it before games. He had a pad on it. It was pretty terrible. It was to the point where he was nervous about it getting checked out because he knew that it was that significant. So he kept putting it off. They put it off as long as they could. And then by the time it got to the play-in tournament, Nick Sang, again, trainer, was saying, we need to get this looked at before the playoffs. And he's like, all right, well, I mean, regardless of what's happening, like, I'm not missing any time. It's the playoffs. I'm not missing any time regardless of what they say. And so they found out that they had that non-displaced fracture. So it was a bone chip in his wrist that was like on the surface of that wrist bone there. And essentially what happened is it healed over, but like that injury was still there. And because they didn't actually properly get it looked at, it was about 8 weeks between it getting injured and them looking at it. And that was right before, it was like during the play-in tournament. So that was right before the first round series against the Nets. So it had healed over, but it was still like sensitive. Like it hadn't fully healed. It was like a partial heal. So every single time he was driving to the basket, taking any kind of contact on the wrist, if he was falling over, anything like that, he was feeling it in that wrist, in his offhand. It was his left wrist. And he says that it actually got re-aggravated during that Milwaukee series, during game 3, when he went up for a dunk. Giannis did the chase down and fouled him, and he landed on it. And that was kind of where it ended up flaring up again for the playoffs.
And Tatum, like you say, like, look, game 3, right? Giannis does that chase down block in game 3. Flares back up. Cortisone shot. He even said, look, I've lost some coloring in my hand because there's not much muscle there. So the cortisone shot has affected the hand. He still goes and drops 46 in game 6, playing through the pain barrier, playing against some of the best defense he's seen in his career. I mean, that was probably the most physical series of the entire playoffs. And he did it with a fractured wrist. Then he goes and gets injured against Miami. And as I've said, he has that injured shoulder, fractured wrist, sees out the series in Miami, away from home. Then he goes against Golden State, and all of a sudden he runs out of steam. He's dealing with the shoulder injury. He's got a fractured wrist, and he still plays every single game of that series. My entire takeaway from that part of the interview was everybody needs to watch out for this year's Jayson Tatum. If he comes back and his shoulder's healed, his wrist is healed, he's actually rested for the first off season, probably since he entered the NBA, we could be about to see an all NBA season again from him. Except I think he's going to take it one step further, especially when you have a Supermax eligibility on the line.
And he talked about that a little bit too in the interview, was saying, you know, it's tough for reporters like trying to make those decisions because they have financial implications. But in terms of that injury and everything, he kind of just talked it off. He wasn't even saying like, oh, this is the reason why we lost. He's like, everyone's banged up. Everyone's a little hurt. If you're injured, then you can't play. But like that was the whole reason why I was scared to get the MRI, because I was like, something is wrong. I don't want anyone to tell me that I can't play. And he said as much now, like with the rest and the time off and everything, his wrist feels better. It was really just getting a chance to rest it properly. And as you've hit upon a couple times now, he didn't have a lot of off time, like between a deep playoff run and then you have the Olympics and then going into a season and then having one of the second deepest playoff run. He was the last 2 teams there. So he played a lot of basketball over the past 2 years between that, everything going on with the bubble. Like it's been a long time since he's had a few months to legitimately just breathe. And now finally, like they're getting back to almost semi-regular basketball schedule with the season starting in mid-October. That's going to give him some time to heal. And this is a good thing. I think this kind of puts to bed any kind of concerns about. I didn't buy the soft stuff when it was happening. Like he was clearly injured, and people saying, "Oh, he's making excuses." Well, it's like, well, it looks like he was dealing with two like serious injuries, and you just don't know what's going on behind closed doors. So we really shouldn't just like speculate on whether a guy's like giving up or mailing it in. Like this wasn't it. This wasn't a Kyrie Irving situation. Okay, this wasn't someone shooting like 7 of 20 for 4 straight games and clearly like folding on his team. Like this was a guy who was clearly battling through injuries, and the wrist one is especially more evident now. Like I think there was one time where he showed up at the podium where he had his hand wrapped up, and I don't know if it was after that game 3, but I know it was in the playoffs because I remember watching the clip where it was like that was the only evidence they ever had on camera of something being wrong with his wrist. Because other than that, he said I had to keep it wrapped up whenever I wasn't on camera. So like when he's off the court, like if he's doing shoot around, he's got it on until media's let in, and then he's got to take it off. If he's taking a pregame nap, it's stabilized with that brace. When he's going to bed at night, stabilized with the brace. So he was doing everything he could to keep on the floor, and that itself is commendable.
And then doing everything he could to keep it out of the media as well. Do you
Mm-hmm.
know why? Because the reason he was wrapping it up and then taking it off before the cameras was coming on was to make sure there wasn't a disparaging narrative. No excuses. Like if you watch the way him and Udoka kind of coached his team, especially after the Eastern Conference Finals, there was no excuses. We don't raise banners for Eastern Conference championships in this organization. We don't make excuses. So Tatum made sure that nobody really saw him wearing that brace, specifically to ensure that there was no excuses or no media narrative that would give the Celtics an out if they struggled or if they took their foot off the gas. And the downside to that is when he did struggle against the Warriors, everybody was on his back because nobody knew he was playing with the wrist fracture. Everybody just, they kept downplaying the shoulder injury as a stinger or a recurring stinger. So it was very easy to be like, yo, the lights are shining brightest and Tatum's wilting right now. When in reality, he was playing through multiple injuries and still helping the team as best as he could. And yeah, he ran out of gas and he admitted that himself. But overall, that entire playoff run is even more admirable now that you know what he was going through behind the scenes, and even more admirable because he wouldn't let it become a narrative that gave the Celtics an out if they fell short.
Yeah. It almost gave me like shades of like when LeBron showed up on like the podium and he had his wrist wrapped. And he was like, "Oh, it's nothing. Like it's my wrist has been bothering me." Like he could have very easily done that. Like
Yeah.
don't get it twisted. Like he could have very easily done the same exact thing, and he probably would have got dragged for it. And that's exactly why. Like he doesn't want some kind of narrative saying like, "Oh yeah, he's just making up some kind of excuse." And it also like from the other side of it, like this kind of reminds me, this happens in like the NFL a little bit too, where guys will be injured or dealing with something and they'll keep it under wraps as long as possible. So like they don't have any issue of like targeting or something like that, where it's like, yeah, this guy's dealing with like a really bad ankle injury. So like I'm gonna go ahead and hit him with like a mean crossover because I know he's not gonna be like as mobile enough. So like they're gonna be like, well, he can't finish as well with his left hand, so we're gonna force him right. We're going to force him to his dominant hand, or you do vice versa. Like his left hand's not good, so we're going to force him to the left. Like they could have very easily done that. And maybe that's something that like teams picked up on, but that's why you don't publicize injuries if you can avoid it. And that's something where it's like, again, everyone's banged up, but if you're injured, you're not playing. And that's why he really kept that as under wraps as he possibly could. And I mean, to the credit of the team too, like this was kind of like big news when it dropped. It hit about like 5:30 on Sunday, 5:30 Eastern time, and like it kind of blew up from there. So, I mean, again, my takeaway is I don't think this is an excuse. I think this is just another layer to that offseason run of how impressive it was, and the fact that he was gutting it out just makes me appreciate Jayson Tatum a lot more.
And then we move on to the working out with Kevin Durant scenario.
Oh boy.
So everyone watching this is a Celtics fan. Everybody watching this had their own opinion on whether or whether not Jayson Tatum should have been working out with Kevin Durant. You had the side that I lay in, which was very much, if you get the opportunity to work out with Kevin Durant, you take it. Like, regardless of everything else that's going on, you're going to improve by working out with Kevin Durant. Then you had the other camp of people very reasonably saying, well, yo, aren't you disrespecting Jaylen Brown a little bit by doing this? You know what I mean? And I could see there's a way that I could talk myself into like believing that, but at the same time, what I'd expect that Tatum kind of gave Brown the heads up, like, hey, you're going to work out with KD tomorrow. You're probably going to see some shit in the media, you know? So, and like, this is what KD said. I'm just going to read out a snippet. So I'm literally picking this to suit my narrative. So, you know, it's what we're used to at this point from journalists. We were okay. I've known KD since I was in high school. We were on the USA team together. Spent 5 weeks together last year from Vegas to Tokyo. Won a gold medal. We have a bond. That's my brother. I'm not too proud to admit that KD is one of the best players in the world. So if one of the best players in the world wants to work out with you and I could learn a few things, why would I say no? Why would you say no?
Exactly.
Kevin Durant?
It's Kevin Durant.
Are you nuts? Like, no. You work out with Kevin Durant because for one of the reasons is Jayson Tatum has been very widely associated with Kevin Durant in terms of skill set, their fluidity in their shooting motion, their size, their ability to handle the rock, their ability to defend multiple positions, their ability to be the main guy as a scorer or defer and be one of the main facilitators. So if you're Jayson Tatum and KD hits you up like, yo, bro, you want to work out tomorrow? Yes. Yes, I want to work out tomorrow. You're Kevin Durant, and my game is closely associated with yours. In fact, it's one of the closer associations you can get when comparing playing styles. Yes, I want to work out with you. All I'd say is I do hope that Tatum hit up Brown before working out with KD, just to give him a heads up that some media probably is going to come out about this, and people might not be too happy.
I have to assume that like there's a group chat or something, you know, like it's not something that like players just go ahead and like not do during the off season. Like, and that's something that Tatum says, like, guys work out with one another all the time. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, it shouldn't be this big thing. He said as much that, you know, if you're in the media, they're going to exaggerate what you do. Like, they exaggerate everything I do. And if you worry too much about what other people think, this is the direct quote. If you worry too much about what other people think, you're going to drive yourself crazy. And it's crazy that I can't work out with somebody. That's all it was. So if that's what it is, then that's what it is. Like, and I take his word for it. Like, I don't think anything I think where the speculation really comes in is the fact that the Celtics have been connected to Kevin Durant via trade. It's not like it's just two random guys like working out together, like two players who are NBA caliber. Like some of these guys have the same trainers. Like I remember there was videos of like pickup games with Embiid and Tatum in the gym at the same time. And that was because they both work with Drew Hanlon. So it's not unheard of to see guys like playing together in a pickup game or like all the crazy like pickup games where it's like, okay, like you know, you've got Hoodie Mello out there like playing pickup in the gym with a bunch of other NBA guys. It's not a big deal. The only reason why it's even a story at this point is because Durant's wanting out. Like he wants to be on another team besides the Brooklyn Nets. So I think any other team, basically any other team at this point, any team that's going to really meet the ridiculous asking price that the Nets have. And that's something that we're going to cover this week as well, because there was more news dropping recently.
Tune in tomorrow for more news updates.
Absolutely. But I mean, truth be told, I think Tatum probably communicated this stuff with Brown. I don't know why he wouldn't. They talk. Like they talk. They're guys. Like they're on the same team. They're coworkers. You talk to your coworkers, right? Relatively.
I have no coworkers. I'm self-employed.
Well, then there you go. But you got connections and stuff. You know what I mean?
I've got
we talk. Other people talk.
I understand. Like, you know, you converse, you have conversations, and you make points. And this is going to be something that I genuinely believe Tatum would have at least gave Brown a heads up on. Just you know, as an aside, Jaylen Brown be doing some underwater training for real, because we saw that video a few weeks back. And then another video surfaced of him basically doing farmer's walks underwater, 2 weights, go down to the bottom of the pool. So you're fully submerged, you know, dumbbell in each hand, and you're walking lengths underwater for that resistance. Why? Because that's the closest you're going to get to the hyperbolic time chamber as physically possible. Jaylen Brown is going to be so fast this year and so twitchy, because that's the sort of, like, it's just such an old school way of training. And it just brings me back to during the pandemic where he was running up the stairs, hitting the boxing gloves with his grandpa, running down the stairs, push-ups, just old school fitness and speed and twitch, like fast twitch muscle training. So to see him doing that again now, for the second time in this offseason, I'm expecting his explosiveness and his ability to kind of stop on a dime or explode and change directions at pace. I'm expecting all of that to be on a whole new level. The only question is can he handle the ball at that speed? Because he already gets loose with the rock when he's running fast. If he's working on improving his twitchiness, his ability to change directions, you have to hope, and I would assume so, that he's also working on being able to handle the ball while playing at that speed.
I mean, we also saw him working out with Tracy McGrady again. Like him and T Mac have worked out
T-Mac.
together before a couple times, so it was cool to see him working with him again. So if you're going ahead and you're looking at the two main pieces of the Celtics, you've got one guy working out with Kevin Durant, you've got the other guy working out with freaking Tracy McGrady, and doing all these other crazy trainings and stuff. Like this is good news. These are guys who just came off of a deep finals run, and they won against arguably the greatest dynasty of the past 10 years, or maybe the 2000s, if you want to say, of this, century or whatever. So this is good. This is good. Like it would be a lot more worrisome if like there was just videos of him partying out in like Miami or LA or something like that. Like these
Living that
guys are
life.
working. They're working.
Fun fact: Tracy McGrady follows me on Twitter.
That's
Just
a flex. That's a flex.
I've got flexes upon flexes when it comes to that stuff. But yeah, he does, and it was a very happy day on my part. Moving on, I think we'll hit on this one last one. We could talk about, there was a few different points Tatum made, but I just want to hit on the main ones. So the last one was he was miserable, man. He didn't want to leave the crib. He was very, very upset when the Celtics lost in the finals, as he should be, as we all were. He obviously, him and the rest of the other 14 guys on that roster, plus the coaching staff, were probably hurting more than any of the fans were, because we gave up an hour or two to sit on the sofa, drink beer, eat nachos, and watch the game. They gave up hours upon hours of sacrifice, and then they fell short. So he was super miserable, said he didn't really have an appetite, didn't want to leave the crib, didn't want to speak to nobody. But now, he's back on it. He's back on his bullshit. Went out to Seattle, dropped 5 threes in the first quarter of a game that got cut off at halftime because the court was unplayable. I mean, come on now. I mean, you Seattle want a basketball team back. You cannot have courts that need the game being called off halfway through.
What were they playing anyway?
Somewhere
like I know it's a pro-am, but like I don't know like where in Seattle it was. Was it like a high school or a college? Had to be a
No
college.
idea. I don't even know what, dude. Like people say it's these pro-ams, but and I get it. It's pros versus amateurs and stuff, but I don't know where these are happening. I'd like to know if I'm ever in like the States and there's a pro-am going on. I want to be there. I call them pro-ams. I don't know why, but if there's ever a pro-am going on, I want to be there. I want to experience this. But no, I don't know where they were. All I know is Tatum lit some dudes up.
He looked good. That's the bright side. He does look to be moving pretty well, and that
Not
shot
like when
looked
the
great.
Knicks, not like when the Knicks played in the pro-am.
Yeah, that's bad. That was bad.
They
like
got 40 dropped on them by 2 separate dudes, man. 2 separate dudes went for 40 on those guys. So, at least we can take solace that, Tatum out there throwing alley-oops to LeBron, dropping threes left, right, and center. Looks fast, looked clean. Everything looked smooth. His jumper seemed to not have that like hitch at the release point. But there again, that kind of started to become more prevalent towards the end of the season. Was that hitch there? Or was it amplified due to the wrist issue? I'd assume there was definitely something there that would have made that hitch more noticeable. It's always been there, it kind of gets to the top, pulls back a little bit, and then releases. You got that like millisecond hitch. Looked a lot more clean. Boom, straight through. Yep, elbow straight every time. You see how I do that? That's muscle memory, guys. Muscle memory. But he looked smooth, man. He really did look smooth. So I was super stoked to the way he played, even if it was just a pro-am. It's just for fun. And the one thing he told Taylor Rooks was basically like, yeah, I came here to give some kids some memories, man. So when they're older, they look back to like, I remember when Jayson Tatum showed up in Seattle and just lit dudes up. I'm like, yo, that's the mentality you got to have, bro.
Absolutely. I think before we wrap, I want to say I think we're going to see like an MVP caliber season from him. I want to see how it wraps out, but like he's plus 1,200 for MVP odds right now. at least according to like DraftKings or whatever.
You said before we wrap, so you got a freestyle to draw.
No, that's it. That's it.
Oh,
That's
you
my
see, you gave
freestyle.
people false hope, bro.
MVP. Mic drop. That's it.
Yeah, I'll beat by. All right, then. With that, we'll leave y'all to. We'll be back again tomorrow because we're going to hit on some KD talk. We're going to hit on some additional signings on Exhibit 10 deals, blah, 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 blah. Try and give you double the amount of content because the last week being Tim being away and next week me being away. So, you know, we're trying to fit this in where we can. Please, please, please hit that subscribe button if you've made it this far. I should have said it at the beginning, but, you know, we're rusty out here. We're rusty. Peace out.
Cheers.